Okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the day 2 of our graduate student showcase here at the TESOL International Conference. Today, we're going to start with Andy Liu. Andy is currently a second-year MA graduate student majoring in English Studies at the Department of English, which is the part of the Faculty of Humanities and Arts at the University of Macau. He is interested in second language writing, language testing and assessment, literacy development in general, also language assessment literacy and language assessment fairness and justice, as well as academic literacies in particular. He does have a website which you can visit if you'd like to learn more about his research. I'm popping that in the chat box now. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Andy. Today, his presentation is Revisiting Language Assessment Literacy, Past, Present, and Future.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thanks for your introduction. So hope you can hear my sounds and see my slides clearly. Okay, now I will start sharing. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Macau, wherever you are. I'm Andy Jiahao Liu. So today my presentation will be Revisiting Language Assessment Literacy, Past, Present, and Future. And this is paper actually partially selected from my graduation project, especially the literature review section. So I hope I can make such kinds of things happen and hope you will take some take-home messages from my presentation. So basically, I will deliver my presentation from the following 4 aspects. Firstly, I will have a general introduction of the language assessment literacy, so you can have a general idea of what it is. And I will briefly introduce the importance and the significance of this study, and then I will have a brief overview of previous studies. Following by that, I will introduce the reviewed paper selection standards, and then I will have a detailed review from the following 5 aspects: origin, from literacy to language assessment literacy, and then definitions, the common patterns revealed in existing literature, and the framework, some discussions and common issues. And then it's about the discussion of language assessment literacy stakeholders, the representations and the applications. And finally, I will present some available LAL instruments, especially the common patterns and issues found in the existing research. And to conclude my presentation, I will introduce where should we go concerning a summary of the common patterns revealed in previous studies and some suggestions for future research. So now we will move on to a general introduction of language assessment literacy. Actually, language assessment literacy is quite a new concept in our language testing field. It is a term developed from assessment literacy in the general educational field, and it has become an area of major concern in the language testing field since the last decade. And to quote from Popham, he argued that ignoring assessment literacy is a professional suicide of teachers, as teachers are the key agents in assessing students. So in this case, I mean the classroom-based assessment throughout the education process. Also, Harding and Cromwell, in their discussion of the teacher assessment literacy, pointed out that the language assessment literacy should be a crucial part of teachers' professional development. So you may wonder, what is language assessment literacy? So generally speaking, language assessment literacy refers to the knowledge and the skills you should hold to assess students in a language context. And this is later I will introduce you more details about the differences and the overlaps between language assessment literacy in the language testing field and the assessment literacy from the general educational field. And to indeed, actually, starting from the last decade, a burgeoning number of studies have been well documented in the literature. Here is a brief summary. So previous studies have investigated the definition and the scope of existing studies, for example, in Banlori, and then they introduced some propose some different models and different frameworks for language assessment literacy, such as Davis and Taylor. And also there are quite a discussion about the stakeholders in language assessment literacy, especially the in-service teacher, pre-service teacher, and also other stakeholders such as university administrators, test takers, and etc. And also there are some instrument development and instrument validation related to language assessment literacy. And in recent years, just in recent 5 years, the language assessment literacy has witnessed a trend from the general language assessment literacy to more skill-specific language assessment literacy. For example, the signed language assessment literacy and the writing assessment literacy. So following that, I will briefly introduce you guys my reviewed paper selection standards. So basically the paper I selected are from 1992 to 2022. And also the sources are selected from Web of Science and some major language testing journals, such as Language Testing, Language Assessment Quantity, and some book chapters, etc. And when I'm doing the research, I'm using the keywords language assessment literacy or assessment literacy plus language. I will read the abstract to close down the gap and to close down the papers I selected. And there are 5 inclusion criteria, including the origin, definition, framework, stakeholders, and instrument. So finally, I selected 38 papers for a thematic review, and now I will report my review findings in different themes. So let me start from the origin or from the development of from literacy to language assessment literacy. Basically speaking, literacy in a general term refers to the ability to read and write in language. However, influenced by contemporary economic, technological, and social-cultural factors, the word literacy has expanded into multiple literacies. So currently, literacy now represents competencies or knowledge in a particular area, for example, feedback literacy, academic literacy, and assessment literacy. And today I will only focus on assessment literacy and language assessment literacy. For assessment literacy, this is a term coined by thinkers in 1991. This is first appeared in the general education field, representing the necessary knowledge and skills required to assess students for various purposes, such as diagnosis and placement, highlighting the necessity that teachers should become assessment literate to develop fair and sound assessment. And language assessment literacy actually is a subject-specific assessment literacy. This is developed from the cultural terms, and there are some overlap and differences between assessment literacy and language assessment literacy. So similarly, assessment literacy, AL and ARAL, they are all emphasize the role of assessment knowledge and the technical skills needed for score analyzing and interpreting. However, the differences, especially the construct of language, has distinguished language assessment literacy from assessment literacy. Also, like to quote from Harding and Cormier, the complexities entailed in the assessment of linguistic skills, knowledge, and communicative competencies have also separated language assessment literacy from assessment literacy. And then about the definitions, indeed, ARAL was first conceptualized by Brandley in 2021. So he noted that limited studies had been conducted to explore the teachers' assessment practices, training, and development needs in the context of language teaching programs. Although there are quite a lot of teaching programs trained teachers how to conduct assessment practice in general educational field. And then as the special issue in language testing published entitled Language Assessment Literacy, the language sentiment literacy has become an emerging research agenda in the field, and there are a lot of definitions emerged. For example, Fulcher 2012, Marlowe, Olin, and Pierre and Harding. I will briefly introduce Fulcher's definitions of language sentiment literacy. So Glenn Fulcher defined language sentiment literacy as the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to design, develop, maintain, or evaluate large-scale standardized and/or classroom-based tests, familiarity with test processes, and awareness of principles and concepts that guide and underpin practices. So you will notice that Fulcher's present definition actually are only to some extent are only applicable to classroom-based assessment or class teachers. So here is a common pattern that I found it. So although the existing language sentiment literacy definitions have well documented in the literature, there is still little agreement on what LAL should include. Especially to quote from Imbalori, the role of language features within this field is still undecided. And so there are also three other common issues rotate can be summarized based on the language sentiment literacy definition discussed above. So basically, they are all theoretically prescribed by language testing researchers, except Fulcher, which is quite empirically derived. And then they are broad and technical in nature, which makes other stakeholders or some stakeholders or the general public to determine what should be included in the knowledge or skills dimension. And lastly, the definitions are ignoring of the diverse stakeholders' needs, interests, or their expectations. But they did share one thing in common, that is a key language sentiment literacy component, that is knowledge, skills, and principles, which I will be reported in detail later. So in the framework, similarly, Brandley also is the first one to bring the first framework related to language sentiment literacy. He has introduced the professional development of language teachers through 2 core and 3 optional units. The take-home message of his framework actually are the understanding the social, educational, and political aspect of assessments or the contextual factors. And following that, Davis in 2028, he reviewed all the testing textbooks, and he summarized that the language testing textbooks has showed a trend from skills to skills plus knowledge and then to skills plus knowledge plus principles. So basically, Davis' framework can be summarized to skills plus knowledge plus principles. And in Valori, she introduced and summarized the LAL framework as what, why, and how. So what represents the rationale for assessment, what represents the law is trained to be assessment, what is going to be assessed, and how is the procedures of assessment. But Imbalori didn't provide so many details about the portions or how important which component it is. So he has mentioned that understanding the what and performing the how necessitate appreciation of the why. Then Taylor, he further developed Imbalori's framework. He argued that there should be a balance between the different components, and Fulcher, based on a survey result from 278 language teachers, he proposed a triple model from the foundation in practices to the ethical principles to the historical, social, political, and philosophical context. And so he then in Pierre and Harding, they introduced and they made a significant breakthrough, I would say, to describing the language sentiment literacy development process through as a continuum rather than or a progression from illiteracy to multidimensional literacy, rather than a binary concept like literate or illiterate. And the most important one in the current field is Taylor, 2013. She proposed 8 dimensions by the verbs, including knowledge of theory, technical skills, scores and decision-making, personal beliefs and attitudes, local practices, socio-cultural values, language pedagogy, principles, and concepts. And her study actually has provided theoretical basis for follow-up empirical studies. For example, there are some extensions and developments based on her hypothesized framework. For example, Baker and Richards in 2018, they added the collaboration and the task performance dimension into the framework. Corrimier and Harding added the watchback and the preparation, language structure, use and development dimension into the concept. And Bone and Tasagori added the disciplinary competencies and the metacognitive skills into the discussion. So although these models currently, they have different things and different components in the field or in their models, the three key components, skills, principles, and knowledge proposed by Davis are shared in the such kind of things. And also, one another important thing can be summarized is that language assessment literacy is quite a multifaceted concept, which include a lot of more detailed knowledges. And also, language assessment literacy is stakeholder dependent and context dependent, but the existing LAL frameworks are difficult to apply to specific stakeholders, such as some test takers, because the framework similar to the definition are still theoretical in nature, and they are quite pre-definition or prescribed by language testing researchers. So it is also, in this case, it's reasonable to argue that the existing AL frameworks follow the top-down directions rather than from the down-top or bottom-up function from the test taker perspective to the teacher's perspective. And later you will notice the influence of such kind of thing. And then it's about the stakeholder. So in Taylor in 2018, in 2000, he proposed a classification of stakeholders, reconceptualized Reed Dickinson's classification, resulting in a detailed list of stakeholders as shown in this figure. And you will notice that the learners are the most important one in this work and in the both sides. However, in Taylor's discussion in 2013, you will notice she divided stakeholders into three groups based on their language assessment literacy needs and the involvement in the language testing field. In detail, the language testing researchers and test makers are at the core. Course instructor and language teachers are in the intermediary category, and the general public and the policymakers are at the february. So you will notice from the 2000 framework to the 2013 framework, there is an ignorance of learners. And this is quite a tricky part that I noticed when I'm reading, as the learners are the most important agents in assessment. They attend the assessment, they use the assessment results, and they are the immediate watchback receiver of the assessment, but learners' role are ignored in the current discussions of such kind of things. And also there are some empirical evidence to support such kind of things. So there are over-representation of pre- and in-service teachers, especially, and there are limited studies on test marketers, policymakers, and test takers. So just the theoretical framework influenced by, to some extent, I would say, influenced by the theoretical framework of stakeholders. So learners' role are marginalized in the previous language assessment literacy studies. And then it's the instrument. Indeed, the existing language assessment literacy instruments informed by the theoretical framework are primarily concerned with pre-service and in-service teachers. And for some details limited by time, you can read Danukana Itra 2013 and Kobo 2020. And also there are some primary research methods. So mostly the previous studies are conducted in quantitative methods, especially using questionnaires. And also there are limited quantitative studies using interviews. And also, however, there are fewer mixed method studies. And so this is almost the review end. And then here comes to the conclusion part. So where should we go? And based on the summary reviews about where should we go. So in conclusion, the preceding sections provide a detailed review of language assessment literacy from the standpoint of origin, definitions, framework, stakeholders, and instruments. Drawing from such review, the following research gaps or the following research common patterns can be summarized. So firstly, previous language assessment literacy definitions and frameworks are still theoretical and general in nature, making it difficult for relevant stakeholders to understand at what level their language assessment literacy should be. Secondly, the previous language assessment literacy definitions and frameworks have been largely predefined by language testing researchers rather than concrete voices from relevant stakeholders. I mean, most of the existing language assessment definitions and frameworks are theoretically in nature. They are not empirically derived, but the language assessment literacy are quite context dependent. So later I will introduce some future research agenda. And the last thing is that the recent discussion of language testing stakeholders has excluded learners, a vital stakeholder group, into consideration. And such kind of recent AR studies or the instrument actually have overrepresented teachers' language assessment literacy, though they are quite important in the assessment circle. But we still need to understand other stakeholders' language assessment literacy, their needs, their interests, and their expectations of language assessment, such as learners, university administrators, etc. So two future research agenda can be summarized. The first one is the future research can incorporate other stakeholders' voices into discussions, frameworks, and empirical studies. For example, learners and university administrators, or even just from the test marketeers or the English office examiners. And then we should developing some empirically derived frameworks to represent the contextual characteristics of language assessment literacy across contexts. And here are the references. So that's the end of my presentation. So thanks for your sharing. I hope this is not quite a boring one.
Okay, thank you so much, Andy. There was a lot of information there and a lot of interesting points raised. So now I'd like to open up the floor for questions. So does anybody have any comments or questions? Please, you can feel free to turn on your mic or you can pop a question in the chat box. I think I'll go first with a question. Andy, what got you interested in this area of research?
Actually, this is a part of my graduation project. I can show you the justification. So firstly, I'm a learner, and when I'm reading the existing literature, I'm surprised to notice that our voices are underestimated or marginalized by the current literature. So as a learner or as a language testing researcher, I'm hoping that I can contribute some voices, so maybe a little small, to the current field. And then the most interesting one is when I'm doing a side project for my study, I noticed that the learners, they are taking assessment and they have opinions to show their attitude towards language assessment and what they are speaking about, but there are no researchers or existing researchers to showcase their opinions towards language assessment literacy and their needs or their interest in language assessment literacy. So when I'm collecting the data back, I'm quite surprised and I'm quite motivated to conduct such kind of studies to further explore.
Excellent. I think that's a really, really insightful and also related to your experiences. So I can see you're very motivated to continue your research. That's wonderful. So if there are no other questions, oh, we have one from Alan. I'll read it aloud. Do most of these research studies focus on standardized language tests created by experts or on classroom tests created by teachers? Does LAL involve the teacher's ability to create an effective test? So there's two questions there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your question. And this is a quite insightful one. So indeed, the existing research studies, I would say that we don't have a clear border between the standard language test and the classroom test in the research studies. Most of the studies are just investigating the same, regard the two test types as the same thing. But Futter 2022-2012, he specialized in classroom tests. So my answer to this question is yes and no. To some extent, some researchers were separated out, but some researchers were only regarded it as the same thing. And concerning your second question, yes, teachers' ability to create or develop effective test is one important component in the language and literacy discussions. And for details, you can read Strand Brown in 2016. They have provided quite a summary about the teacher's ability and teacher's frameworks. But in Taylor's framework, we are more important in the knowledge of theory or in the knowledge of scores that decision making, such kind of things. But the ability to develop or create an effective test is one important skills or one important knowledge that the teachers should have.
Thank you, Andy.